Welcome to WLOX News Now at 10. I'm Mackenzie Martin. We received audio from the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources on Friday related to the Nolan Wells case.
Let's separate two things right at the top, because the whole internet has stopped separating them. There is a claim going around. 3 words. Bart did it. And there is the actual record. They are not the same thing, and by the end of this you'll see the gap between them is enormous. Here is the record. No one has been charged in Nolan Wells' death. No agency has named a suspect. No agency has named a person of interest. And the man the internet is naming, Bart Edmiston Jr, 21, has not been called any of those things by anyone with a badge. The Bart did it claim did not come from the sheriff, the FBI, or the family's lawyers. It came from social media. So we're going to hold the record in one hand and the noise in the other, and we are going to be honest about which is which. Because a name typed into a comment section is not evidence, and a young man who has not been charged is not a suspect just because a video says so. So what is actually confirmed? Let's build that list, brick by brick, because it's short and it's solid. The timeline comes first. It comes from GPS data, which means it's not a memory, it's a record. According to WLOX and CBS News, the boat left a private dock at 9:56 that morning. It reached Horn Island at 11:14. It left the island at 4:31 in the afternoon, heading back toward the mainland. And Nolan Wells was last seen on the island around 3 p.m. That's the skeleton of the day. Everything else is flesh we're trying to put on those bones. Now the discovery. The National Park Service found Nolan's body on July 6th. That's 2 days after the trip. According to the agency, he was face down in the water near the northwestern tip of the island. The Jackson County Sheriff, John Ledbetter, told reporters there was no initial indication of a crime. That's a quote from the record, not from a comment section. And he said investigators are still working to determine what occurred. Then we have the autopsies. There are 2 of them, and you need to understand how they differ. The state autopsy is complete, but it's sealed. According to NBC News and CNN, it won't be seen until a grand jury reviews it. So right now, that document is a closed door. The family didn't want to wait for that door to open. They commissioned an independent autopsy. It was performed by Dr. Roger Mitchell Jr., and the results are public. Here's what those results say. The cause of death? Undetermined. The manner of death? Undetermined. That's the finding. It's not a conclusion of accident, and it's not a conclusion of homicide. It's a formal statement that the evidence doesn't point clearly in either direction. The report documented an area of red discoloration in the deep, soft tissue at the back of Nolan's head. And here's the honest part. According to the doctor, the cause of that discoloration is unclear. It could be a decompositional change, or it could be a blunt force injury. The report cannot rule out non-accidental factors, but it also cannot confirm them. That's a door left open, not a verdict delivered. Now about Bart Edmiston Jr. Let's be precise about his actual role that day, because the internet has twisted it. According to TMZ and WLOX, he did not travel to Horn Island with the group. He was a former high school teammate of Nolan's, but he wasn't on that boat. He was separately on the water, and when the group's boat began taking on water, he helped. That's the action the record supports. He rendered assistance. And what has he said? Through his attorney Russell Latino, Edmiston denies any role. The statement from his legal team says he did not kill Nolan and did not in any way contribute to his death. It says he had no motive. It says he did not date or even know the woman at the center of the online story before Nolan's death. And it says he cooperated fully with investigators. He gave them access to his boat, he gave them his GPS data, he gave them his phone. That's cooperation. That's not the behavior of someone law enforcement is chasing. Because again, according to the record, no one is chasing him. No charges, no suspect designation, no person of interest. The attorney's cease-and-desist letter states there are no publicly available facts or evidence that he is a suspect in any crime. And the pressure on him is real. On July 29th, according to WLOX, Edmiston reported receiving a death threat to the FBI and local law enforcement. His family says they're taking legal action against what they call egregious actors and an influencer over the accusations. And a legal defense fund started by the father of one of Nolan's friends has raised over $125,000. That money is not for Nolan's family. According to Rolling Stone, it's to cover legal costs tied to potential lawsuits against people falsely alleging the teen's involvement. So here's where the record ends and the question begins. We have a timeline, we have a discovery, we have an undetermined autopsy. We have a man who helped and denies everything, and who is not a suspect. What we don't have is a full public account of those hours between 3 p.m. and 4:31 p.m. The GPS shows the boat leaving, but it doesn't show us what happened before it did. That's a gap in the public record, not a mark against anyone in particular. That gap is where the internet inserted its own story, and it landed on one name, Bart Edmiston Jr. According to TMZ and ABC News, the Bart Did It claim spread across TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram in late July. The accusation is unverified. It did not come from law enforcement. It did not come from the family's legal team. It came from social media users who tied it to something specific, the recorded CTO distress call. Here's what that means. When the group's boat began taking on water, someone called for help. That call was recorded, and in the background of that recording, some listeners claim they can hear chatter that implicates Edmiston. But according to every news source covering this, TMZ, ABC News, WLOX, that interpretation is not supported by any official agency. No investigator has cited that audio. No prosecutor has referenced it. It is a theory built on background noise. And the theory has a motive attached. The online story says Edmiston killed Nolan over a romantic rivalry involving a young woman. The woman is named in reporting as 19-year-old Katie McCormick. The story says Edmiston and McCormick were involved, and that Nolan was in the way. That's the narrative. But here's what Edmiston says through his attorney, Russell Latino. He says he did not date the woman. He says he did not even know her before Nolan's death. He says there was no motive. And he says he cooperated fully, handing over his boat, his GPS data, his phone. The attorney's cease-and-desist letter states there are no publicly available facts or evidence that Edmiston is a suspect in any crime. Still, the accusation has a life of its own. On July 29th, according to WLOX, Edmiston reported receiving a death threat to the FBI and local law enforcement. His family says they are pursuing legal action against what they call egregious actors and an influencer who helped spread the claim. And the ripple effect has been wide. A Give-Send-Go legal defense fund, started by the father of one of Nolan's friends, raised more than $125,000. According to Rolling Stone, that money is not for Nolan's family. It's to cover legal costs tied to potential lawsuits against people falsely alleging the teen's involvement. The family described threats as race baiting, though the reporting does not detail those specifics. So we have a claim that says Bart did it, we have a man who says he didn't, we have an attorney who says there's no evidence, we have a death threat. We have a legal fund aimed at protecting people from lawsuits over the accusation, and we have zero official confirmation from any law enforcement agency that Bart Edmiston Jr. is anything more than a former teammate who helped when a boat started sinking. But here's where the timeline starts to crack the story open, because the GPS data, the same data Edmiston handed over, tells us something about where everyone was, and when you line it up with the online claim, something stops fitting. Before we line up those coordinates, we need to look at what made this case national news in the first place. And it wasn't the body. It was a 3-minute audio clip. The CTO distress call. That's the recording that started everything. On July 4th, someone on that boat called for help. The boat was taking on water. And in the background of that call, you can hear voices. Multiple people talking over each other, trying to figure out what to do. According to the reporting, some social media users listened to that background chatter and heard something specific. A name, Bart. And from that moment, the clip stopped being a distress call and started being evidence. Here's how the spread worked. First, someone clipped the audio and posted it to TikTok. The caption claimed you could hear Bart Edmiston Jr. in the background, that he was on the boat when it shouldn't have been. Then Facebook picked it up. Then Instagram. Each post added a layer. The first post said, "Listen closely." The second post said, "That's Bart." The third post said, "Bart did it." That's the pattern we've seen in case after case. A snippet of audio, a confident caption, a named suspect, and the name sticks before anyone checks the source. Here's what the official record says. The sheriff's office has not named anyone as a suspect. No one has been charged. The family's attorney says there are no publicly available facts or evidence connecting Edmiston to any crime. And according to the reporting, the Bart did it claim did not originate from law enforcement, from prosecutors, or from the family's legal team. It started with social media users listening to background noise. Now, the media literacy part, and this is where you have to pay attention. The audio clip is real. The distress call happened. Edmiston was on the water that day. He helped when the boat started taking on water. That's confirmed. But a real clip is not the same as a real accusation, and a voice in the background is not the same as a confession. Here's what got mixed up. The Bart did it claim tied Edmiston to the boat, but according to the reporting, Edmiston did not travel to Horn Island with the group. He was separately on the water. He helped when the boat began taking on water, so the same person being named as the killer in the posts is the same person described as the helper in the reporting. Two versions of the same man, from the same day, from the same audio. And that's the thing about media literacy in this case. The clip made it feel immediate, the captions made it feel certain, the hashtags made it feel shared, but none of that made it verified. The sheriff's office has not confirmed it. The attorney has denied it. And the man at the center of it received a death threat because of it. According to WLOX, Edmiston reported that death threat on July 29th. His family says they're pursuing legal action against what they call egregious actors and an influencer who helped spread the claim. And the legal defense fund, that $125,000, was started to cover lawsuits against people who falsely alleged the teen's involvement. The family described the threats as race baiting, though the reporting doesn't detail those specifics. So we have a clip that launched 1,000 posts. We have a name that spread faster than any official statement. We have a man who helped on the water being accused of murder on the internet. And we have a legal battle forming around the gap between the clip and the truth. But here's the question that matters tonight. If the online claim doesn't match the official record, if Edmiston wasn't on the boat, if he helped, if no one has been named, then what does the GPS data actually show? Because that's where the timeline stops being a theory and starts being something else entirely. So let's strip away the noise and look at what's actually confirmed, not the captions, not the hashtags, just the record. According to the GPS data reported by WLOX and CBS News, the boat left a private dock at 9:56 in the morning. It reached Horn Island at 11:14. It left the island at 4:31 that afternoon, and Nolan Wells was last seen on the island around 3 o'clock. That's the timeline, and here's what it does to the story you've been reading online. The Bart did it claim places Edmiston at the center of the day. But the GPS shows a group that was on the move. They had roughly 5 hours on the island, from 11:14 to 4:31. That's the window. And within that window, Nolan was last seen at 3 o'clock. So the entire sequence of events, whatever happened, has to fit into that span. Now the autopsy. According to NBC News and CNN, the independent autopsy performed by Dr. Roger Mitchell Jr. listed the cause and manner of death as undetermined. It could not rule out non-accidental factors. The report documented an area of red discoloration in deep soft tissue at the back of the head. The cause of that discoloration was unclear. Could be decompositional change. Could be blunt force injury. That's a real finding. It's not nothing, but it's also not a conclusion. The official state autopsy is complete, but according to the reporting, it's sealed until a grand jury reviews it. So we have two autopsies. One is private and undetermined. One is official and sealed, and the authorities have indicated that accidental drowning is a possibility. That's not a cover-up, that's the record. So what does the confirmed set alone imply? Let's walk it out. The body was found face down in the water near the northwestern tip of the island. That's according to CNN. The boat left the island at 4:31. Nolan was last seen at 3 o'clock. So between 3 o'clock and 4:31, he went from last seen to not accounted for on the boat. That's 91 minutes. The friend's public account is that Nolan chose to stay behind on the island. He was reported missing that night. The open question is what happened in the water, not an accusation aimed at anyone, because the record hasn't aimed one. Here's the part that matters. Nothing in the confirmed record places Edmiston on that island. Nothing places him on that boat. The GPS shows the group's movements. Doesn't show him. The distress call captures his voice helping. It doesn't capture him harming anyone. The autopsy documents an injury of unclear origin. It doesn't document who caused it. And the sheriff's office, according to ABC News and CNN, said there was no initial indication of a crime. Jackson County Sheriff John Ledbetter said investigators are still working to determine what occurred. So when you read "Bart did it" with the certainty of a caption and the urgency of a hashtag, you're reading something that the confirmed record does not support. That's not me defending anyone, that's me reading the same sources you can read, and the sources say, no charge, no suspect, no person of interest. The attorney says Edmiston cooperated fully, gave his boat, his GPS, his phone. That doesn't sound like someone hiding. But it also doesn't prove what happened. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The confirmed set tells us what happened less than we'd like. It tells us the boat left at 9:56. It tells us Nolan was last seen at 3 o'clock. It tells us his body was found face down near the northwestern tip. It tells us the autopsy found something at the back of his head that couldn't be explained. But it doesn't tell us how he got into the water. It doesn't tell us when. And it doesn't tell us who was with him in those final moments. That last part, that's the part that keeps the case alive. Because the GPS gives us the outline. The autopsy gives us the anomaly. The sheriff gives us the uncertainty. And the grand jury, the sealed autopsy, that's where the next chapter is locked. Because when a grand jury reviews a case, they see what we don't. They see the full picture. And what they decide, whether to charge someone, whether to close the case, whether to open a new one, that decision doesn't come from a TikTok caption, it comes from evidence. So we've followed the online claim, we've checked it against the record, and the record holds the line. But there's one piece we haven't touched yet, one piece that the GPS doesn't show, one piece that the autopsy can't clarify, and it's the piece that might change everything about how you read this case. It's the piece that makes the online story feel possible in the first place. And it's the piece that the sealed autopsy might have already answered. But there's something we haven't talked about yet, and it's the piece of this case that the online story hinges on. The person at the center of the alleged motive. The young woman the accusations say Edmiston was fighting over. Katie McCormick, she's 19, she was on that island, and according to reporting from WLOX and CBS News, the friends who traveled with Wells said he stayed behind with her. That's the seed of the whole Bart did it theory. A romantic rivalry. Two young men, one woman. It's a story that writes itself. But here's what the record actually says. Edmiston's attorney, Russell Latino, says his client did not date Katie McCormick. Says he didn't even know her before Nolan's death. No prior relationship, no history, no motive. And Katie McCormick herself, she's not charged with anything. No agency has named her as a suspect. No one has alleged she did anything wrong. She's a 19-year-old who was on a beach when a young man died, and the internet turned her into a plot point. That's the thing about this case. The confirmed facts are thin. The open questions are wide, and the people at the center of it are real. Real families, real grief, real fear. Edmiston's family says they're taking legal action against what they call egregious actors and an influencer over the defamatory accusations. That's not a bluff. That's a legal filing. And according to WLOX and WLOX, Edmiston reported a death threat to the FBI and local law enforcement on July 29th. A death threat over an accusation that no agency has ever supported. And the Wells family? They're not chasing the online story. According to NBC News and CNN, they commissioned their own independent autopsy. They hired Dr. Roger Mitchell Jr., and what he found wasn't simple. Cause of death, undetermined. Manner of death, undetermined. He documented an area of red discoloration in the deep soft tissue at the back of Nolan's head. He couldn't say if it was decomposition or blunt force injury. He couldn't rule out non-accidental factors. That's not a conclusion. That's a question that deserves an answer. Meanwhile, the official state autopsy is complete, but it's sealed until a grand jury reviews it. And that's the part that matters. Because a grand jury doesn't read TikTok, they don't watch Instagram reels, they look at evidence, they hear testimony, they see the GPS data, the autopsy, the timeline, the distress call, and they decide whether to charge someone, whether to close the case, or whether to keep digging. The family's attorney, Ben Crump, is watching that process. The sheriff's office is working it. And according to ABC News and CNN, authorities have indicated accidental drowning is a possibility. But the independent autopsy couldn't confirm that either. So where does that leave us? It leaves us with a young man named Nolan Wells, 18 years old, a wide receiver at Southwest Mississippi Community College, a kid with a future, a kid who went to Horn Island on July 4, 2026, and never came home. His body was found on July 6th, face down, near the northwestern tip of the island. The GPS shows the boat left at 9:56 that morning, arrived at 11:14, left the island at 4:31. Nolan was last seen around 3. That's the timeline, that's what we know. And everything else, the motive, the rivalry, the accusations, that's what we don't know. That's what nobody knows, except maybe a grand jury. The online story says Bart did it. The record says no one has been charged, no one has been named. The attorney says Edmiston cooperated fully, gave his boat, his GPS, his phone, and still, the accusations follow him. Still, the death threats come. Still, a legal defense fund raises more than $125,000, according to Rolling Stone and the Detroit News, for the friends falsely accused online. That's what this case has become, a story that outran the facts. A story with real consequences, and a family waiting for answers. What the grand jury decides next is a question this family can't afford to get wrong, and it's the question we're all waiting to hear the answer to. Because for the Wells family, this isn't a case, it's Nolan.